Audiobook Academy Biography presents Sébastien Le Prestre de Vauban. Sébastien Le Prestre de Vauban, a French military engineer, was born on May 15, 1633, in Saint-Léger-de-Faucherist, now Saint-Léger-Vauban, France, and died on March 30, 1707, in Paris. During Louis XIV's reign, 1643 to 1715, he participated in all of France's conflicts. Early years. In the small nobility, Vauban came from a family of little means. It was at this point in 1651 that he enlisted in the regiment of Prince de Condé Louis II de Bourbon and began training to fight against the youthful Louis XIV. It wasn't long before Vauban's abilities were discovered. The defense of Argonne towns and the siege and conquest of Saint-Ménehould for Condé were among his many accomplishments. Government forces kidnapped him in 1653. He was soon persuaded to switch sides and help the royalists retake Saint-Ménehould after he was treated so well. In 1654, he was wounded twice during a siege. A new cadre of officers dedicated to fortification and siegecraft was established in 1655, and he was admitted as a king's ordinary engineer to serve in this new unit. He served as engineer-in-chief at the siege of Gravelines in 1658 after participating in assaults against numerous fortifications and cities between 1655 and 1657. He was involved in fortifying Alt-Breisac, a French outpost on the Rhine's right bank, from 1664 to 1666, and destroying Nancy's defenses, from 1661 to 1662, during this period of peace, from 1659 to 1667. He was assigned to the Picardy Regiment in 1663. For his part in the French conquests of Tournai, Douai and Lille during the 1667 invasion of the Spanish Netherlands, he received pension, lieutenancy in the Royal Guards and the position of governor of Lille Citadel. Even though Vauban's official title was Commissary General of Fortifications, he had a growing number of duties, including frequent travel, an extensive correspondence with the king and the Minister of War, the Marquis de Louvois, and a close relationship with the king. For more than a century, Vauban's technical notes on fortifications were the primary source of military research in Europe. It wasn't just the defenses of the French Low Countries, Picardy, and Lorraine that he reviewed in the period 1668 to 1672. He also went to Piedmont in 1671 to advise Savoy on the defences of Varus, Vercelli, and Turin. Developments in siegecraft. His presence at sieges commanded by Vauban during the Dutch War of 1672–79 won Vauban considerable glory. During the siege of Maastricht, 1673, he employed a comprehensive system of parallel trenches, which were constructed parallel or concentric to the perimeter of the defences and connected by radical zigzag trenches, which protected the approach from the defenders' cannon fire. As a result of his success at Maastricht, he was elevated to the rank of Maréchal de Camp, equivalent to Brigadier General, in 1676 and given a gift of money that allowed him to purchase the Château de Bezges, located near his family's seat of Vauban. He convinced the king, against the advice of Louvois and 5 marshals, to permit a daytime assault at the siege of Valenciennes in 1677, in part because the conventional assault in darkness often resulted in the attackers shooting at one another by mistake. He was given more money for the conquest of Valenciennes. When Vauban returned to France's boundaries in the years 1680–81, he carried out yet another extensive tour, this time focusing on fortifications. The stronghold he planned for Strasbourg in 1681 was of the highest quality. He reconstructed the city's defences after leading the siege of Luxembourg in 1684. His design for the fortification of Landau, Bavaria, is sometimes regarded as his most significant contribution. 1687. Vauban was promoted to lieutenant general in September 1688, during the War of the Grand Alliance, in which Louis was opposed by the combined forces of the Netherlands, England, the Holy Roman Empire, and their lesser allies. In October, under the command of the Dauphin Louis, he captured Philipsburg, on the right bank of the Rhine south of Speyer. A projectile was constructed to bounce forward over parapets and hit multiple targets before its force was exhausted during this siege. The Socket Bayonet, another invention of his, was also being advocated at the same time. Before shooting the gun, the bayonet may simply be slid over the muzzle and inserted into a socket. He captured Mons in 1691 and Namur in 1692, both quickly and with little fatalities. In 1693, he was in charge of an infantry division for the first time. In 1694, he went to Brest to protect Brittany against an English invasion, but returned to the Low Countries in 1695 to defend Namur but was unable to save the city. As part of the siege and capture of Audun in 1697, he received another wound, this time to the hand and arm. The last of Vauban's 160 fortifications, Neuf-Brisach in Alsace, was rebuilt during the peace of 1698–1701. By this time, his health was failing, yet he remained eager to participate in the War of the Spanish Succession, 1701–14. In order to avoid serving under marshals less experienced than himself, he requested in writing to the king in 1702 that he be elevated to the rank of Marshal of France. It was Louis XIV's understanding that Vauban's patronage of France's successes much outweighed the performance of higher lords whose birth alone had hastened their appointment as marshals that he appointed Vauban to the post of marshal in 1703. It was traditional for marshals of France to command an army in battle, but Vauban had never done so, and he was only capable at engineering, which was deemed lowly by the French. Following the recovery of Alt-Brisach, 1703, he was relieved of duty and returned to the army. To his dismay, his offers to assist an ill-equipped general at the siege of Turin, whose defenses he had personally designed, were turned down again in 1705 and 1706. Dunkirk's entrenched camp was Vauban's final effective task, 1706. The UNESCO World Heritage Site designation for several of Vauban's fortifications in France, including walls, towers, and mountain forts, was announced in 2008. Writings. Vauban was a tireless worker. After work and while recuperating, he spent his time devoted to writing on issues of public interest. Many of these compositions, titled Oisivits, Leisures, were compiled by him into manuscript volumes. Some were related to his vocation, while others were not. On siege and fortification, his treatises written in 1705–06, were published in 1737 and again in 1829. Several interpretations of his systems of fortifications had been published in his lifetime. In addition, he wrote about the necessity of bringing the Huguenots back to France in 1689, the routes for canals and inland navigation, privateering at sea, and the geography of the Vézelay district, as well as on forestry, pig breeding, and overseas colonies, and on international affairs, with regard to the concessions that could be made, strategically and politically. To achieve a satisfactory peace, 1706. Projet d'un Dix Royal, printed anonymously, 1707, Project for a Royal Tithe, or General Tax, was his most major leisure, recommending the removal of practically all France's current taxes and the substitution of a 10% tax on all land and trade from which no one should be excluded. With an extraordinary amount of statistical evidence, he pioneered the use of statistics in economics by proving his points. As a result of the French government's reluctance or perhaps inability to rescind the privileges of the privileged classes because of its dependency on them, the publication of his book was prevented. It's widely believed that Vauban's book made Louis XIV forget about his prior duty, however that's not true. Personality. Vauban was a tall, slender, and well-built man. His unassuming demeanor and rough demeanor belied his genuine desire to serve others, which he tried to hide behind his unassuming demeanor and rough demeanor. On the battlefield, he was always worried about saving the lives of his fellow men, and he often led other officers to receive the credit for his own courageous actions. The most honorable and virtuous man of his age, unable to lend himself to anything false or wicked, wrote the Duc de Saint-Simon, the great Louis XIV memorialist who never spent praise. Thank you for listening in Audiobook Academy. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button for more content like this. See you in next video.